think I'll go ahead and get started.
Sure.
So welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Linda Hashuff. I'm the Executive Director of Opportunity Alliance. We also have with us our Office Manager, Tracy Sherwood, who is going to make sure things run smoothly. We are going to have some really great panelists today on a really important subject. You know, it's around many issues around housing. I think you'll find all of their information of interest and pertinent. So a few housekeeping issues. If you want to ask a question, please enter your information into the chat. And if you think you want to have an actual conversation, there's a way to raise your hand. It's part of the reactions, or is it part of reactions? Anyway, we'll know you want to. We have set up this series. We call it our virtual brown bag luncheons. And we set them up so that we can bring in experts from across the state on issues that are really important to all of us. And we have just recently offered a sponsorship opportunity for folks that want to participate with us on that level as well. And I want to thank Charles Schwab, the Estepona Group, Las Vegas PBS, Wells Fargo, JP Morgan Chase, and US Bank for being one of our very first sponsors for these webinars. Our board chair, Nancy Brown, usually joins us, but she's not here today. She's away on vacation. I do see that we have several other board members with us though, so I want to thank Leanna, David, and Lisa Marie for being here today. This is done in partnership with the Gwynn Center. So Nancy Brune, we work very closely with at the Gwynn Center. She couldn't be here today. Possibly Sam Lair from their agency will be with us. Let's see. So it's been a really strong partnership working on both sides of the information. So these will be monthly webinars and luncheons, and the topics will vary. They'll all be recorded and posted on our website. And going forward, starting in July, we are developing a series that is called Pathways to Racial Economic Justice in Nevada. And right now we have a series of 6 topics that it's all, a lot of it's still in the preliminary stages. We have amazing panelists that have committed to us and experts across the state as well, some of them federal. So we might have a federal and a regional touch on this as well. So watch for those. The first one will be July 9th, coming up pretty quickly. They'll be at lunch, at the lunch hour as well. I think we allotted to 1:30 like we did today for this. Let's go ahead and get started. Enough from me. Today we're going to talk on, we're joined by Legal Aid of Southern Nevada, the Attorney General's Office, and Money Management International. We're going to talk about tenants' rights, evictions, housing fraud, current state of mortgage assistance programs, and the Home Again program. So remember to go ahead and know that you can post your questions in the chat function, and Tracy will be watch for that. So I want to introduce our first panelist. His name is Jim Berchtold. He is an attorney with the Legal Aid Center of Southern Nevada, and he works in the Consumer Rights Project and has a team of over 50 Legal Aid Center employees who fight for the rights of low-income Nevadan consumers to protect them from such things as fraudulent car sales, abusive debt collection, predatory payday and title lending, unfair and illegal housing practices and foreclosures, financial exploitation by guardians, and all manners of scams and deceptive trade practices. Sounds like a great, a terrible group of things to be having to deal with, Jim, but we're really glad you're here today. So please take it away.
Thank you, Linda. And good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, everybody. So I'm going to be talking about the status of the eviction moratorium in Nevada today. So as many of you probably know, on March 29th, the Governor Sisolak issued Directive 008, which instituted basically a pause on all evictions in the state, as well as foreclosure actions. Now, I'll start with the big question we get all the time, which is, how long is the moratorium going to last? The answer is, it's unclear. We don't know right now. So under Directive 008, and the governor has said that right now the moratorium will last until as long as the state of emergency lasts, unless he rescinds 008 or modifies it in some way with another directive. So right now, that's where we're at. The moratorium is in place and we have no definitive end date. Now, this is important because there's been a lot of inaccurate information out there. We've seen dates in news reports and in news articles. We've had hundreds of tenants and landlords calling us, asking when they heard the moratorium was lifting and what do they need to do. Right now, the moratorium is in place and there is no end date. I want to be really clear about that. Now, that could change any time. The governor certainly has the power to end the moratorium at any time that he wishes. There are a lot of people working behind the scenes, legal aid and other tenants' rights organizations, the Apartment Association, the Realtors Association, and others are working with the Attorney General and other stakeholders to try to figure out a way to roll out of this moratorium in a logical, thoughtful way. But until the governor announces something, the moratorium is in place. So what exactly does the moratorium prevent? So essentially it presses the pause button on all evictions in the state. So any eviction that was currently in process on March 29th, when the moratorium was instituted, that is paused. Lockouts of any kind by a landlord, paused. Importantly, eviction notices are also paused. So if you don't know, the way an eviction is initiated in Nevada is by the landlord giving the tenant a notice. And the notice will say, this is the reason for the eviction. Right now, under the moratorium, no eviction notices can be issued. And that means that no evictions can go through the court. The courts aren't hearing any anyway, so no evictions in the state right now. Now, there is an exception to this. If the tenant is a danger to other tenants or to the public, or is causing significant damage to the property, or is engaging in some illegal conduct, then there is an exception to the moratorium, and a landlord can apply to the court and ask the court for an eviction order. The judge will evaluate that and determine whether or not it fits under that exception that the governor has outlined. Who does this apply to? The eviction applies to basically everybody. Certainly what you would classically think of as a landlord, yes, it applies to those landlords. It also, according to the governor's, the information that the governor has issued and the Attorney General has issued, it also applies to weekly rentals and long-term hotel situations. So it essentially applies to everybody in the state right now for the logical reason that it's in everyone's best interest to keep people where they are and keep them housed. Now, does this mean the fact that a tenant may be unable to pay during this moratorium, does that mean that that rent is forgiven? No, it absolutely does not. The governor's directive makes clear that this is not a rental forgiveness program. So if a tenant has been unable to pay during the course of the moratorium, that rent is still accruing. When the moratorium lifts, a landlord will be able to evict for the non-payment of that rent. The landlord will also be able to sue for any unpaid rent. The governor has encouraged landlords and tenants to work together to come up with a repayment plan for those amounts. Various stakeholders have been working with the Attorney General, who has headed up a project to develop a standardized repayment plan that landlords and tenants can use. So that is in the works. There are a number of other ideas that are being bounced around, but right now, moratorium's in place. Landlords and tenants are encouraged to work something out. Now, keep in mind, everything I've been talking about is at the state level. We have another level that we need to consider too. Under the Federal CARES Act, there is another moratorium in place. That moratorium applies to any property that has a federally backed mortgage and some other properties that receive federal benefits. So under that federal moratorium, non-payment evictions are also prohibited. there is a requirement that once the moratorium lifts, there is a 30-day notice that the landlord has to give before any eviction can proceed, and no late fees can be charged during the moratorium. And let me back up to the state level for a minute. That's also a requirement under the state moratorium. Right now during the moratorium, no late fees can be charged to a tenant. No late fees, no penalties under the lease. So during this moratorium, those are not accruing and they cannot be charged and cannot be sued for once the moratorium lifts. So again, back to the federal level. So the federal moratorium is set to expire by statute on July 25th. So even should the state moratorium lift, there is still the federal moratorium that needs to be considered. So we'll have to wait and see when the state moratorium lifts and how those two coincide with one another. Now, if a landlord is violating the moratorium, the Attorney General has taken aggressive action to prohibit such violations. So they are, the AG's office is accepting complaints from tenants. We are referring a number of tenants over there and assisting them with submitting complaints to the Attorney General. So if a tenant is locked out by a landlord, that is a violation of the moratorium, certainly, but that is also a violation of state law. The courts are still accepting complaints with regard to illegal lockouts. So if a tenant has been illegally locked out of the premises, or if their utilities have been shut off, for example, the tenant can still file with the court and get relief from the court, potentially getting back into the property, potentially getting the landlord fined up to $2,500 plus actual damages. The Attorney General is also pursuing these violations of the moratorium as a deceptive trade practice. So if you know of a tenant who is having an issue with a landlord is violating the moratorium, the remedy right now is to submit a complaint to the Attorney General's office, and the Attorney General's office will pursue that and has done so vigorously. Now, I have been talking specifically about evictions. Please keep in mind that this moratorium, both at the federal level and at the state level, that also applies to foreclosures. So it not only applies to tenants, it also applies to homeowners who have potentially been unable to make their housing payments during this time. So that's really the status of evictions. I would suggest that everyone keep their eyes and ears open because, as I said, this is a very fluid situation and the governor could come out with additional direction at any time. So it is definitely something to keep your eyes peeled for.
Really great information, Jim. Thank you. Any questions? I don't see any in the chat box. I have a question, Jim. You said that the complaints need to go through the AG's office, where Opportunity Alliance has a volunteer program where we assist the general public kind of managing, the financial side, but a lot of it, sometimes they need the legal help as well. So we don't refer them to the Legal Aid Center of Southern Nevada. They're to be referred to the AG's office.
So right now, typically, if somebody contacts our office and it's a complaint involving the violation of the moratorium, we are assisting the person in filling out a complaint to the AG's office. And that has been the primary enforcement mechanism for the directives. If it is a situation where the tenant is on the verge of being locked out, has been locked out by their landlord, we are having attorneys file in the court to try to get them some relief. So it kind of depends on the situation, but absolutely feel free to refer anyone to our office at Legal Aid Center of Southern Nevada, and we will be sure to get them to the right place. But they can also go directly to the Attorney General's website, and they have a form complaint on there that the tenant can fill out.
Great, thank you. Early on when we launched our program, we had someone call in, and they did live in one of the Weekly motels, and they were locked out. And they were probably in a precarious situation other than just that. So they didn't want like law enforcement involved. I think maybe they didn't have the right citizen status or something. Still have them come to you on that as well?
Absolutely, absolutely. Initially, when the moratorium was enacted, there was a lot of confusion about whether it applied to the Weeklies. I think there was, and by weeklies, I mean people who have a week-to-week lease agreement, pay their rent weekly, live in along the budget suites line. So the governor did come out with some additional direction specifying and making clear that yes, the moratorium does apply to the weeklies. So the issues that we've been seeing at the weeklies thankfully died down a little bit as everybody's gotten some clarity on that issue. But yes, if you see anybody who is having some kind of issue, please refer them to us and we'll be happy to help them.
Great.
Can I interrupt? We have 2 questions from our group also.
Sure.
Leanna would like to know, she says, just out of curiosity, did landlords receive help to not have to pay their payments? I would imagine that they would be hurting if not collecting their rents as well.
Right, yes, so that's absolutely true. So under the Federal CARES Act, homeowners and some multi-housing units were able to get forbearance on mortgage payments during the moratorium instituted by the Federal CARES Act. So there has been that relief, but again, that only applies if the mortgage is federally backed or if it's subject to some kind of federal program. So that is, which is a lot of mortgages, don't get me wrong, but that still leaves a lot of homeowners and properties who have absolutely struggled to make their payments while the tenants have been unable to pay rent. I mean, keep in mind that this is a situation that no one accounted for, and so everybody is feeling the pain in the situation. That is absolutely true. Now, there hopefully are some programs in the pipeline right now to provide monetary assistance to tenants and to landlords. There has been money released from the federal government under the CARES Act to the state level that is currently being earmarked to provide assistance to help landlords and to help tenants who have fallen behind in those situations. So again, that's another thing. Nothing has been finalized yet, but that's certainly something that everyone should watch out for.
Perfect, thank you. Jessica, I'm gonna leave your comment about the press conference of the governor tonight at 5 p.m. Just gonna say that it's in the chat, so if people wanna refer to it. Does Nevada Legal Services also provide these services, or is it just legal aid? That's from Kristen. And then I do have 2 more. I don't know how much time you want to take to answer questions.
We have time, so go ahead. We have some more time.
So briefly, in case you don't know, there are primarily 2 legal aid organizations. There are others, I don't mean to discount them. There are 2 main legal aid organizations in Las Vegas. There is Nevada Legal Services and the Legal Aid Center of Southern Nevada, which is where I work. Nevada Legal Services does have a tenants' rights clinic, and they are also fielding a lot of calls on these same issues. So either one of those organizations can provide some assistance.
And what about in the north, Jim? Do you know anything about the north?
So Nevada Legal Services is actually statewide. So in the rurals and in the north, Nevada Legal Services would provide assistance. There's also an organization in Washoe. Washoe Legal Services operates in the north, an excellent organization that is also heavily involved in all these issues.
Great.
Thank you. Deanna asks, many apartments are increasing rent and forcing new lease agreements during this time. Is there any protection on that?
So there's no protection as far as at the federal level or pursuant to a governor's directive. There was always protection for a tenant with respect to whether or not a landlord can raise rent. If you have a lease agreement, the landlord absolutely cannot raise your rent. You have a contract with the landlord, that contract is valid, and the landlord can't change that any more than the tenant can change that. Now, if you are a month-to-month tenant, meaning that your lease has expired, but you have continued on the property and you pay your rent every month, then the landlord can raise your rent, but the landlord has to give you a 45-day notice before they can do that. So they have to give you notice 45 days before the rent increase goes into effect. So tenants and landlords both need to be a little careful right now. I think everybody's kind of scrambling. There is no requirement that a tenant enter into a new lease agreement. There is no requirement that a landlord offer a new lease agreement. So everything's in sort of a weird flux right now, but that doesn't mean that the normal landlord-tenant statutes aren't in effect. And under the normal landlord-tenant statutes, there are protections for tenants as far as rent increases.
Thank you. And one last question, Sherry, I think to follow up on that information, can you change a tenant from a lease that is expiring to a month-to-month agreement during this time? And I think you kind of answered that.
So that actually just kind of happens as operation of law, right? If the tenant is on the property, the tenant has a lease agreement, and the lease agreement expires, but the tenant continues on and the landlord keeps accepting rent, then the tenant is a month-to-month tenant. That just happens whether you intend it to happen or not. So during this moratorium, that would continue to happen.
Thank you. Those are all the questions that I see right now.
And I have one additional question, actually two for you, Jim. I don't know if you can stay till the end of the session in case there's more questions.
Of course.
And, you know, they mentioned the governor's press conference coming up today. I think it's at 5 o'clock. I'm just curious, do you have a feel if he might address the moratorium today?
I honestly don't know. I know that there has been a lot of proposals made to the governor, and I know that everyone has been trying to figure out a way for the moratorium to lift in a logical way. Everybody has different opinions about what that might look like, and I'm sure the governor, I'm sure, is getting information and advice from all sorts of areas. Right now, there is nothing. We do not know whether the governor is going to address that or not.
So you don't get a heads up.
No, but I'm dying to know. So yeah, I'll be watching with everybody else.
I'll be watching too. Good. Well, thank you, Jim. That was really great information. So thank you for sticking around too. And now I'd like to introduce Michael Kovac. He's a Chief Deputy Attorney General. He does the Criminal Prosecutions Division, and he's going to address criminal laws that apply to housing related to fraud, examples of housing related fraud, prosecutions that have happened in the past, and the process for referring matters to the Attorney General's office. So welcome, Michael, and thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for the invite. I appreciate it. As she said, my name is Mike Kovac. I'm the chief with the Criminal Prosecutions Division, and I'm just going to go through some examples of matters of fraud relating to housing that we saw as a result of the recession a decade ago. Because we anticipate that as people start losing their homes due to the economic consequences this time around, we'll probably see a lot of the same stuff. So we want to show you some indicators so that if you come across the same thing and you think it's criminal, you know where to go with that information, and then hopefully we can take care of it from there. I'm going to try to share my PowerPoint here. All right, is you able to see that? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So there's going to be two layers of potential fraud we think we might see. One are going to be the foreclosure rescue scams. Everybody's going to be desperate because they're losing their homes. And we're going to have scammers coming along saying that they have special ins with the banks or some other ability that other people don't have, and charging the desperate homeowners thousands of dollars and not doing anything for them, and leaving the homeowners in even worse condition than they already were. And then there are going to be some post-foreclosure scams we're going to talk about also. Those post-foreclosure scams, the victims are often the banks, as well as innocent tenants who are taken advantage of by people who claim ownerships to homes they have no interest in. So here's a real-world example of an organization we prosecuted back in, I think it was 2015. Company's name was American Equity Foundation. And we prosecuted, I think, 5 of their employees and corporate officers. And what they did was basically set up one of those foreclosure rescue scams, advertised like crazy. They held themselves out as a nonprofit organization, and they certainly weren't that. In order to lure the victims to trust them, they said they were affiliated with a federal relief program. They called it the Neighborhood Stabilization Plan. That's not an actual name of a program. There is a Neighborhood Stabilization Program, and I think that's what they were getting at, so they didn't even get that part correctly. And the scam was basically that if you're in danger of losing your home, this company had investors lined up who would purchase the home at a short sale and then rent it back to the people who just lost their home for 2 to 4 years until they got back on their feet. And then the investors would sell the home back to those former homeowners for 90 to 100% of the current market value. None of that was true. It violated regulations relating to arm's length transactions. These people gave anywhere from $299 to $2,299. We had well over 100 victims, and none of them got any relief at all because what they were offering simply did not exist. These are screen printouts from the website of American Equity Foundation. They repeatedly emphasized their connection with that supposed government program. The top arrow there, they said they're based out of Washington, D.C. I don't know if any of them had ever even stepped foot in Washington, D.C. They had a mailbox there that they used. But again, it was something to make themselves look more legitimate than they really were. And the laws that come into play when these types of scammers are providing these types of services can be found in NRS 645F. And NRS 645F basically talks about organizations that provide these services, what they're allowed to do and what they're not allowed to do. And if they do something they're not allowed to do, it constitutes criminal mortgage lending fraud. When we talk about covered services, and this means the group of people, the type of services that are subject to these regulations, they cover a number of things. I gave some examples there. Any kind of financial counseling for a homeowner, receiving money for the purpose of distributing it to mortgage or lien creditors, contacting a creditor on behalf of a homeowner, seeking extensions to cure a default, or any kind of attempt to delay a foreclosure. If anybody's offering those types of services, there's a list of things that they're not permitted to do. And again, it's set out, this time it's in NRS 645 rather than 645F. I gave a couple examples there. People providing these services cannot obtain compensation that's not set forth in the contract with the homeowner. These scammers can't make any representation that the homeowner cannot or should not communicate with the lender. We see that quite often because the scammers don't want the customers reaching out to the banks and learning that the scammers have never even contacted the banks or done anything on their behalf. So it prohibits the scammers from basically concealing their crimes. And then they can't make any kind of representation regarding an affiliation with the government or a government program, like I just showed you in the example. As I said, any kind of violation of those does constitute a crime. It could be mortgage lending fraud. There can be stiff penalties, 1 to 10 years for each separate offense. And then if they engage in a pattern of that mortgage lending fraud, it could be 3 to 20 years. But it's important to remember that the same judges that are going to hear these cases here about murders and rapes and kidnappings on a day in, day out basis. So when these go to court, more often than not, unless these people have prior criminal histories, even if they're convicted, they're more likely to get probation than actually go to prison. And then we have the post-foreclosure scams. And that might not be completely accurate. We're talking about basically people lose their homes or in the process of losing the homes, and scammers come in to somehow claim that property for themselves and or well, they claim it for themselves and then they rent it out to innocent tenants who don't have any idea that they're not the actual homeowner. So a lot of those scams are carried out by our run-of-the-mill scammers who will take advantage of any situation at all. But then there's also a group of individuals that are kind of commonly referred to as sovereign citizens that carry out these scams. And I bring this up because we got, after the recession, there was quite a bit of activity from sovereign citizens. And what I'm talking about there, it's basically a loosely knit group of people that have an anti-government ideology. They believe in this perverse interpretation of common law and religion and something else that basically allows them to take these properties and do what they want with them. There are a lot of telltale signs that you'll be dealing with a sovereign citizen once you start seeing the paperwork. Back in 2015, HUD issued this bulletin warning people of real estate scams being carried out by sovereign citizens. So it's quite common. And this is an example of one of the individuals we previously prosecuted. This was an ID that he was carrying. You can see he said he's a Continental Marshall for the continental United States of America. Obviously, that's not a real thing. In the word United, you can see it starts with a lowercase u and then uppercase N. That's not a typo. They have really odd beliefs in what different punctuation and capitalization means. It's all a bunch of nonsense, but I'm just kind of telling you so that if you come across it, you'll understand who you're actually dealing with. And this is a no trespassing sign that they posted for one of these properties. A family lost their home to foreclosure. The bank owned it. These people went on the property, changed this. I'm talking about these people, the sovereign citizens went on the property, changed the locks, claimed the property as their own, put their own no trespassing signs on, and started trying to rent it out to other individuals. When you come across the paperwork, some of the things you might see, in addition to that odd punctuation, they oftentimes sign their name and then like seal it with their own goofy seal, their fingerprints or thumbprints. They cite the Uniform Commercial Code and copyright law in places that does not apply in any way, shape, or form. This guy, in order to show his ownership of the property in Las Vegas, for some reason thought it made sense to file a copy of his footprints in a federal case in Kansas. I have no idea. I can't even begin to explain how that works, how that would show any ownership of property. But again, I'm just showing you examples of what you might see. It does have, even though it's goofy and it can be funny, it does have some practical consequences for the victims. You know, they file these lis pendens and other documents in the recorder's office. And you can only imagine if you're trying to buy or sell a house legitimately and you have all these nonsensical documents in there. If I'm a potential purchaser, I'm going to say, forget it. I'm not dealing with this goofball. I have no idea what's going on here. So we do have that happen. And then let me see here. That one I don't really need to go over. When we were prosecuting him, he filed a lawsuit against us, Metro, the media outlets that covered his case. He filed this cease and desist. He calls it an order against the deputy that was prosecuting, saying you have to cease and desist. And if you see at the bottom there, it's signed by Maria Kalova, Superior Court Judge. That's for the Superior Court of Nevada, which is not a real court. But if you didn't know any better and you're just some average citizen who doesn't have any experience with the courts, you might think it's a real thing. So a law was passed this past legislative session to deal with this kind of stuff. If somebody is using those kind of simulated legal documents, meaning documents that purported to come from either a real court or a fake court in order to get somebody to do something, either give up their property or give up money or appear in court or something of that nature, it is now a Category D felony, so we can go after them for that. Additionally, if they're filing those documents in the recorder's office or in some other agency that takes those documents and they have false statements in them, we can also prosecute them for offering a false instrument for filing a record. That is a Category C felony. And then moving on to kind of the post-foreclosure scams, or I'm sorry, we're already talking about it, but a different type. So, and let me go back before we get to that. So again, there are multiple victims that could be harmed by these instances where people come in and claim property that they're owned that aren't their own. It's going to cost the banks a lot of money to get these people out, the sovereign citizens, out of the home and clear up the title and all of those things. Additionally, when these sovereign citizens take these properties, hold them out to the public for rent, you have an innocent victim or innocent tenant moving in, spending money or whatever money it took to move in the first place, and then they're going to find out that house isn't theirs and the bank can boot them out of there, and they're going to have to spend the money to go find another place. So it can do some real damage. Now, it also happens for a potential homeowners, it happens that they can be victimized also. An example was a company called Parcelnomics. I prosecuted a husband and wife who were running this company, and people were losing their homes by all sorts of means. The regular foreclosure by the mortgage company, but we also had people losing their homes at foreclosure on a HOA lien. And the HOA lien was a junior security interest. This couple would purchase the property for say $3,000 to $5,000, but they own the property subject to the senior security interest, the mortgage on the loan. But what they would do, and this was a time when house flipping was becoming very popular and everybody's kind of doing things on the fly, they would say that they would hold, after the scammers would purchase those properties for $3,000 to $5,000, they would then resell them and tell the victims that they were unencumbered properties, and these victims would pay over $100,000 and not realize that they purchased a house that has a mortgage that's completely underwater on the home. So that's another example of a post-foreclosure scam that we've run into. For any of these prosecutions, we have challenges. Where there's a criminal enterprise with a lot of people working for it, like we had with American Equity Foundation, the first company that I showed you, we know that a crime occurred. The challenge is figuring out who's responsible for that crime, because just because you work in a business that's committing criminal activity does not necessarily mean everybody working for that business is a criminal. A lot of times we get these scams where you have the ringleaders who have come up with the scam, then they hire people for minimum wage, just making cold calls to get their customers. And these people making the cold calls, all they know is that they're offering services, and there's no reason for them to have any idea that the higher ups have no intention of following through, and it's all a scam. So your victims, all of their communication might be with somebody that's completely innocent. We can't go after them without knowing that the people making the cold calls were actually operating with a criminal intent. And it works vice versa also. We could have a completely legitimate company. The people making the calls are working on commissions, and they get one guy that goes rogue making the calls, and he'll say whatever he needs to say to get his commission, when the people running the show were on the up and up. So a lot of times we need an insider to really help us out and sort out who's actually responsible for the crimes, or sometimes it would take a search warrant and hope we uncover something. So there's definitely a challenge in determining who's actually operating with criminal intent. Another thing that can be frustrating, these cases are very paper intensive, take a lot of time for us. They can be well over 10,000 pages of evidence that we have to sort and organize and go to trial on. And then, as I said, we go there and it's the same judge that just heard, 5 murder cases, and he's going to hear about somebody who stole $50,000, that person's getting probation unless there are some extreme circumstances. And then your victims, please prepare them for the fact that they're almost always going to be disappointed. I would love to be able to get their money back from them, but you can't get blood out of a turnip. And most of our scammers are not the most financially responsible people. So by the time we get to them, that money, you're going to have to find it in whatever casino or strip club they've spent it in, because it's long gone, and it's very rare we can find assets to get your victims paid back. We have occasionally had some luck, but it's very, very, very rare. So I'd just like you to kind of prepare them for that if you do steer them in our direction. As far as referrals go, one thing I'd ask is patience. We have, even though the Attorney General's office is a very large office, the prosecution division is surprisingly small. We have budget restrictions on what kind of cases everybody can work on, also because they're funded from different areas. In total, including myself, for the entire state, we have 7 of us who can handle all of the cases that come our way. And we also cover every crime that's committed in every state prison within the state of Nevada. We cover scams that are way more complicated than these ones, all the securities fraud scams, election crimes. So it's not going to be an immediate result for you. But if you do want to have somebody file a complaint, you just go to the website. I put the address right there. There's also a phone number if you have questions about any of that stuff. And then if you wanted to speak with me, you can just leave a message for the receptionist, and I can, if you had one that you had questions about, I'd be more than happy to talk it out with you if that is the case. And that's all for me.
That's really good information, Michael. And I know we do have one question, but in the meantime, I hate to be a Debbie Downer, but it sounds like I feel like the scammers have the edge.
Oh yeah, they do.
They
Yeah.
get the slap on the wrist.
What's
Yeah,
that?
so it's just so unfortunate.
Oh, I agree. I mean, I try to stay positive, but it's a frustrating situation because, like I said, I mean, your victims it's going to be devastating to a lot of them, but it's going to be kind of comparatively considered when it comes to the judges who see things that, they just are more serious, and that's just the way it is. And I should say it kind of depends on what part of the state you're in also. I'm referring mostly to Clark County, where there's a lot of overcrowding in the jails and prisons. If you get one in a rural area, you have a better chance of getting a prison time than you do in Clark County. That's just the way it is.
Okay. And can you share your slideshow with us so we can mail it out to the participants as well?
I can, that's no problem. And I'm trying to stop sharing now. I don't know where I'm at here. I'm all mixed up with the thing here. So you might have to, oh wait, there it is.
And we'll get that sent out, but Tracy has a question for you as well.
Sure.
Jessica would like to know, she says there's been a lot of scamming going on with titles to mobile homes. For example, buyers are purchasing unaware that seller does not have title to pass, or there are liens on the property. The Manufactured Housing Division has not been overly helpful. Is the AG providing any assistance with these scams?
I haven't recalled us ever getting anything. We have, the first goes to our investigative division, and then if it's investigated and it's there's a chance of prosecution, then it'll come my way. I'd have to ask to see if the investigators have gotten this stuff and worked on any, but I can tell you personally, I've never seen any referrals of that nature come to the office.
Okay. Well, go ahead, Jim.
I just wanted to mention that this is a fairly common problem that we see at legal aid. There is a Nevada law in place where someone who has inadvertently obtained a title to a mobile home that they then can't register because the title history is incorrect. There's something called a bonded title where you can actually obtain a bond to protect that title, which will allow you to register it. It's maybe not the most convenient thing to do, but there are certainly options for people who find themselves in that circumstance. So if anybody knows of somebody who needs help with a bonded title or with a mobile home title situation, they can certainly call our office.
Fantastic. Really good information. Thank you. Thank you both. Thank you, Michael, for all of that really great information. And I'll try not to be a Debbie Downer about it.
Thank you.
Thank you. And now I'd like to introduce Leanne Bradley, who's the housing manager at Money Management International and coordinator of the housing agencies that are Nevada's Home Again program. And she's going to tell you a little bit about that program and then introduce our next speaker. So take it away, Leanne.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Linda, thank you for having me. Like she said, my name's Leanne Bradley, and I'm the housing manager for Money Management International, and we are the administrators for the Home Again program. Just a real quick overview of how the Home Again program started. In 2012, the Home Again Nevada Relief Program was created by the Nevada Attorney General. A call center was established by Money Management International, formerly known as Financial Guidance Center. The purpose of the call center was to receive calls from distressed homeowners to identify the needs of the caller and then refer them to a HUD counseling agency or legal service. MMI works closely with 3 other HUD counseling agencies that are part of the Home Again Consortium. We work with CPLC, which is Chicanos por la Casa. We work with NHSSN, which is Neighborhood Housing Services of Southern Nevada. CSNV, Community Services of Nevada. We also partner with Nevada Legal Center of Southern Nevada, Washoe Legal Services, and Nevada Legal Services. And some of the services that our agencies and partners offer are credit restoration, credit repair, and credit review, down payment assistance, first-time home buyer counseling, rental counseling, modification foreclosure prevention counseling, reverse mortgage counseling, and notario documentation and legal services. The call center is open Monday through Friday from 8 to 5. Phone number for the call center is 855-457-4638. And our website is homeagain.nevada.gov. So that's the Home Again program in a nutshell. Eric Chavez is one of our consortium partners. Eric is a HUD certified housing counselor with Community Services of Nevada. He began his work as a housing counselor during the financial crisis that led to the Great Recession and continues to help and educate home buyers and homeowners through the challenges we face today. Eric is joining us today to talk about the current state of mortgage assistance programs and the risk homeowners must face going forward. Take it away, Eric.
Hello, everybody. Thank you. Good afternoon. We got a great large group, over 100 people. That's exciting. We're pretty close to that, I think. I wanted to have a picture. I'd like to apologize. First and foremost, I couldn't, my office machine doesn't have a camera. But a good place to begin, I think, would be to understand the situation that we're in. What began as a health crisis has created a financial crisis that is going to hurt us for many years. The reopening seems to indicate that we're going to have periods of contraction when they see spikes in numbers. We already see this happening as cities and businesses reopen and announce closings shortly after. This means that people's income and assets are going to continue to be affected in the foreseeable future, which most certainly will affect your housing situation. The good news, because there is good news, the good news is that we have seen this in recent memory. So we're better prepared than last time to address certain situations and offset the pain and the strain. We've already seen an example of this as forbearances were extended across the country by the shutdown to people who were affected by the shutdown without major debate or legislation. Recently, it was also announced that the moratorium on evictions and foreclosures was extended through August for FHA, Fannie Mae, and Freddie Mac loans, which will hopefully allow more homeowners time to get back on their feet before having to resume making mortgage payments. We're also waiting to hear news regarding another stimulus plan, which will hopefully contain some kind of government-sponsored programs or forgiveness, similar to what we saw in the Great Recession. We do not know what that will look like or how it will be implemented. Until we receive news from Washington regarding potential homeowner assistance, we maintain the standard methods of communication for desired outcomes. We would assist the homeowner in applying and explaining the standard outcomes of repayment plans, modification, deferment, sale, or foreclosure. Regardless of any government news we receive, those 5 options will always be included in the conversation between the lender and the homeowner. Homeowners who need answers to their questions can look up Community Services of Nevada. We are a HUD-approved nonprofit housing counseling agency and community resource organization. We offer a range of services that are linked to a person's housing and financial world. If someone is seeking a service that we do not offer, we would refer them to one of our partners in the community. We are a part of a large network of nonprofit and community organizations that offer services that we do not offer, such as legal and health services. Part of that is our membership with the Home Again program. The Home Again program originally was started to help people who are seeking loan modifications or who were current but underwater on their mortgage, people who had gone through foreclosure and were looking towards rebuilding and trying to purchase in the future. The program ultimately was expanded once the recession started to fade. It was expanded for renters, first-time home buyers, and down payment assistance programs. So whenever we would receive a referral, either directly or from Home Again, I meet with them. I review their information that pertains to their situation based on the current status. Homeowners get screened across all programs that may match their needs. One such program would be the Nevada Hardest Hit Fund. They recently relaunched their program again. They had gone away in November and they came back in February as a down payment assistance program. And then that went away in 30 days and now they're back again as to help people who are unemployed. The Unemployment Mortgage Assistance Program is now the only program they're offering. It's very strict, unfortunately, so not everybody is going to be eligible, especially given the timeline that we're in. You must be unemployed due to the pandemic. You must be receiving unemployment benefits. You must be delinquent or behind on mortgage payments. These events cannot have occurred before March 1st, which hurts a lot of people because if you monitor the financial world, you would know that for the last 2 years, there's been rumblings of recession and people talking about we were running on fumes and we were just anything could have knocked us into a recession, and this kind of blew us into a recession is what ultimately is going to come about. But we had people who were already behind on their mortgages before March 1st. We had a significant number in the last 6 months who had contacted us regarding assistance and available options. So this is nothing really new for a lot of people. It's just now added a lot more. But Nevada Hardest Hit Fund will help those who are eligible with up to $10,000 for up to 3 months of mortgage and HOA related payments. That money that you receive in assistance is forgiven after 3 years. So long as you live in the home as your primary residence, you do not try to cash out any equity, and you do not sell the property. So the guidelines of that program are very narrow, unfortunately, but if a homeowner is not eligible for the Hardest Hit program, we will assist them with applying directly to their servicer for assistance. If the loan servicer is not cooperative, there is some recourse locally, such as the Nevada Foreclosure Mediation Program. Homeowners who you have to have received a notice of default in order to participate in that program. But ultimately, the mediation program came out to help people who were having trouble communicating with their lender. Things got a little easier as the last crisis wore out. But it is still available. There are some fees to take part in the program. You must be the owner of the residence and living in it. You cannot be in an active bankruptcy. And ultimately, it's an opportunity to connect with your lender. If you're not getting direct answers, you submit your paperwork in advance, and the mediation appointment is actually just a representative there to deliver a response, a conclusion regarding the results of the bank's review. They call it a mediation, but there's not a lot of negotiation that goes on. They kind of just are there to tell you this is what we find and this is what we feel. They make some offers, potentially one or more options to the homeowner. It doesn't always include an option to remain in the home, because that's not always the best option for someone, regardless of how much they want to. If the dollars and the cents don't add up properly, then it doesn't always happen that way. But there is always recourse if people are not acting in bad faith. But there is a lot of help out there. It is important to get the right kind of help and avoid fraudulent or predatory services. Make sure you are able to read and understand the terms before signing. Avoid companies that make guarantees or that tell you to stop answering the phone. Never pay anyone other than your mortgage server or as directed by the bank. If they say make your payment via Western Union, for example, but that would have to come from them. If you are a victim of fraudulent or predatory rescue programs, you can contact the Attorney General's office or HUD to file a complaint. To avoid these types of problems, of course, reach out to a HUD-approved agency in your area. These agencies never charge any fees for mortgage default services and are constantly studying the evolving world of mortgage assistance. I know that mortgage has been on the forefront of HUD's education for us for the last 2 years. So this is something that they've had their eye on. And that's all for me. Thank you very much.
Really, really good information. Thank you, Eric. I don't see any questions in the chat. I personally have a couple questions. To be set up to access the foreclosure mediation program, is that entered through you? Is it through legal aid? Where's the access point for that?
For the mediation program, typically when someone receives a notice of default, and that typically means that you are 90 days or more behind on the mortgage, that is the trigger for that letter that you would receive. It's a waiver form, and it gives the homeowner the option to opt in, to exercise their rights for the mediation program, or opt out and waive it for whatever reason. We would advise them what their options are, but we would not tell them what to do. That's usually someone else. We don't assist in the mediation program because we're not attorneys. We just provide the basic info.
So it's an automatic letter to them if they're in the 90-day default period.
Yes, in most cases, yes.
Okay, good enough. And then the Nevada Hardest Hit Fund, how many areas of access is there for that funding?
So the Nevada Hardest Hit Fund is, they were supremely overwhelmed when they opened, when they got the approval, because they weren't actually approved and the governor made an announcement, and I think they received something like 12,000 phone calls. And so we're assisting with them. People can apply through Community Services of Nevada for the Hardest Hit Fund program, and we are assisting them with their caseload. Just last week, I received 75 referrals from them for follow-up, potential people that are applying. So there's a lot of need out there.
Wonderful.
Yes, and Linda, MMI is working closely with them as well. So any of the consortium partners are also involved in the Nevada Hardest Hits. So if they call the Home Again number, then we can filter them to, the right agencies to get the, counseling done and the qualification done through the Nevada Hardest Hits portal. So we're all working together on that to help the homeowners.
Wonderful. Okay, great. Anyone else with some questions? Anyone else? You can, that was great information, Eric. Anything else for Michael or Jim? Even if it's off topic, you've got some experts here. If you want to take any questions. No? So, and I just want to ask really quick, putting my board members on the spot, David Crumbly, Leanna Jenkins, and Lisa Marie, if you guys would like to add anything, ask any questions. Well, I hear nothing. So I want to thank everyone for all of you joining us today. A lot of you joined us, and for our wonderful presenters and the information that you shared. I'm sure going forward, there's going to be a lot more questions as well. And I guess we'll all stay tuned for the governor's press conference this afternoon and see what he has to say. I think it's at 5 o'clock. So everyone have a wonderful day, and thank you again for joining us.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Linda. Bye.